Sebastian Vettel is without a shadow of a doubt one of the greatest Formula One drivers in Formula One history, and recently he took part in F1's Formula One podcast Beyond the Grid, a driver who is a 4-time world champion, 53 race winner, and the third most successful Formula One driver in all of history. Here are the things we learned from Formula One's official podcast Beyond the Grid, Sebastian Vettel. We learned in the episode very early doors that the thoughts of retirement came from his change from Ferrari into Aston Martin, around that time where he sort of thought maybe this is his last move, this is his last contract, and with the fact that he had 3 kids as well, kind of played a part in him actually making that decision to finally think about hanging up his gloves, racing gloves, I don't know what you want to call it, his helmet, let's say. Seems crazy now when you consider it, now that it's taken time for people to sink in. Sebastian Vettel retiring started as early as his change from Ferrari to Aston Martin. One thing I learned that was probably normal but kind of struck me in a weird way, he has no degree. And I thought, well, of course he doesn't have a degree because he's a racing driver. But at the time it kind of struck me, like when they asked him about what you're going to do next, he's like, well, I don't know, I don't have any degree, I don't have any speciality in anything else. And they were sort of asking him if he would ever be like as superb in other crafts as he was in Formula One. And obviously he doesn't know the answers to that because his whole life has just been Formula One. Then the question was asked, which is the most happiest Sebastian Vettel at which team? Is it the Red Bull, Toro Rosso, Ferrari, Aston Martin? And I thought, of course, it's going to be the Red Bull, but he comes out and he says the Aston Martin. He's the happiest he's ever been right now, right in this moment. And it's clear to see that Sebastian Vettel and Formula One are parting ways, but not necessarily on a bad spell, but just on the thing of, I've done my time and I'm happy where I am. It's time for me to explore new things. So it was very surprising to hear that his actual happiest moment is right now in Aston Martin. The question was then asked if he was to credit one person who he has to thank in Formula One. Otherwise, without this person, they wouldn't be a 4-time world champion, they wouldn't be a Formula One driver. And the person he actually credits is his wife. And it was a big, quite a different kind of approach to answering that question. Of course, his wife has played a major part in the simple fact that she's allowed him to actually become this 4-time world champion, this phenomenal Formula One driver, an F1 legend, of course. And you need the support of your partner, you need the support of those around you in order to do this. And you can imagine how hard it is for a wife or a partner of a Formula One driver to sort of kind of allow this person to be away for almost 10 months, 11 months of the year, where they're traveling from country to country. And sure, you could probably join the journey and you know, and whatnot, but it's not your passion, it's not your desire. You're kind of giving up, unless she's doing something on herself or doing something on the side. But the idea that, you know what, all the chips are sort of going in Vettel's basket here, and so credit to his wife, credit to the fact that she actually allowed him to do so, and it's not easy. In regards to his time at Ferrari, he mentioned this emotional connection, this kind of loyalty towards Ferrari and Italy as a nation, and he understood the pressures of being a Ferrari F1 driver. And although you know, he wanted to be at Ferrari, he tried to emulate what Michael Schumacher did, a German winning in Italy. He mentioned that he failed. He said, I've simply failed at Ferrari because I was supposed to go and win championships and I didn't. But as time passes on, he says that he's more at peace with it. So he's not kind of like sort of harboring on too long. He's sort of saying, look, let bygones be bygones. It is what it is. Here's what's happened. And he kind of portrays that figure of no regrets. Everything has its time. But he was saying it was definitely an emotional toll for sure, and it took him a while to recover. If there was one thing he could change about his Ferrari career, the only one thing he would change, which you would think winning championships would be the obvious answer, but he doesn't quite answer it like that. He says the Hockenheim incident in 2018 is the moment where he wishes if it only had been a bit different, if he had braked earlier. And he said he braked early, but if he had braked earlier, maybe something would have changed. But then he also said, you know, who's to say I would win the race afterwards? But yeah, definitely that's the one moment that kind of struck out to him in his Ferrari tenure. Continuing talking about Ferrari, he said 2019 was the odd year. It was a weird year. He felt like the start of the season they didn't really have the momentum going into winning races as they had in like 2017 and 18. And seeing Charles Leclerc also, you know, making his debut in that year for Ferrari, he kind of saw a younger version of himself, and it kind of took him by surprise in terms of the battle that he was having with Charles, and even just the fact that he was trying to understand what was happening in life at that time. So that battle with Charles was a big one. And yeah, it was quite interesting to hear him speak, you know, because he said he kind of lost himself and he was just trying to figure out what on earth is going on around him. And so to hear Sebastian say he lost himself, it's a very interesting one. It's probably what is the leading parts of the retirement, probably thinking about quitting the sport. Interestingly enough, we also learned that he spoke to Niki Lauda at some stage in his career about going to Mercedes, because the question popped up, would you have ever joined? Now that you've been at Red Bull, you've been at Ferrari, and he had spoken with Niki Lauda, and I'm only going to assume that it's when Rosberg probably left, but also the fact that Lewis Hamilton was the number one driver by far, and but he would have enjoyed the challenge, and it's one of those where he just felt like it wasn't meant to be, and he was fully committed to Ferrari also at the same time. So a Vettel at Mercedes with Hamilton, how tasty that could have been. And I'm sure both parties probably didn't want to be involved because of what happened with Rosberg. You know, good competition nonetheless, but competition that I think Mercedes wished, you know, they didn't have to go through that year in 2016. Interestingly enough, Hamilton and Vettel's relationship actually begun in a weird way in Baku. If you remember when Sebastian Vettel felt like Lewis was brake testing him, Sebastian Vettel then comes round to the side and hits him on the side, hits him wheel to wheel on the side, and it was a bit of an awkward moment there. It was quite heated between the two drivers, but Vettel goes on to say that they had a conversation, him and Lewis had a conversation afterwards, and he realised that he was in the wrong and he admitted his mistake. And it's one thing that I think about Formula One drivers, whenever they feel like they're in the right, I wonder how many people would actually admit their mistakes. And this is probably why people love Sebastian Vettel so much, because he's quick to apologise, and he's probably quick or even just he's able to admit that he was wrong, you know. And especially after the multi-21 kind of era of Sebastian Vettel, where we all thought of him as the villain, to see him in this light made you think, oh bloody hell, this is how their relationship started. It's like it started from a sort of adverse moment, but became something quite special as years went on. Now, interestingly, a German driver, and obviously moving into Ferrari at some stage, his icon wasn't necessarily Michael Schumacher. He was saying that, you know, they were asking the question, is it because of the likes of Schumacher why you got into Formula One and got involved and interested in the sport? And he was saying not really, you know, it's more so his dad, but his dad was also a Senna fan, and it was just one of those where, yeah, Michael happened to be a Formula One driver as well. And he was saying that, of course, you know, when he won in 95, there was a big boom in Germany, and a lot of Germans, of course, getting into the sport, you know, liking the sport, because obviously one of their own is world champion. But he was saying, like, you know, he was more like he got to know Michael as a friend more than anything. So for him, it was like he would have to take moments and realize, oh snap, he is Michael Schumacher, like the icon, the legend. But to him, it was like, because he was a friend, racing him was like, I'm just racing one of my friends, rather than racing one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. Interesting to hear when he was asked about the fastest drivers in his opinion in Formula One, and what he went off by saying straight away was, teammates is the best way to judge this. You know, the easiest answers could have been the Lewis Hamiltons, the Alonsos of this world, but people that he wasn't in the same car, same machinery, and it's very difficult to always answer that question. Who is the fastest Formula One driver ever? It's almost a question that can never be answered because of the different caveats that are involved, the different parts of the equation of the questioning, because what kind of car do you have? What driver at their peak? You know, when is their peak? And does it all happen at the same time? F1 regulations change a lot. Different tracks, different circuits, different cars suiting different situations. So there's too many things at stake to decide. But he goes on to say that when it came to teammates, he said Mark Webber, when everything was in place, if he was feeling good in the car and whatnot, he said he would feel like this man is unstoppable. And there was a race in particular they mentioned in 2009 where Mark Webber, I think it was in Hungary, where Mark Webber absolutely destroyed the race, and Vettel was like, I gave it everything I had and I just couldn't match with him, and thought, you know what, this guy's superb, he's brilliant, he's amazing, he's fast. Charles Leclerc was another one when he came into Ferrari in 2019, and all of us were quite impressed with Charles Leclerc, to be fair. And Vettel mentions that, you know, Leclerc was one of those drivers that you just sat there and thought, you know, who is this guy? Like, you know, and it kind of rocked him a little bit. And then he mentioned Danny Ricciardo when he firmly beat him in 2014. And it was nice to see Vettel kind of go in this direction about fast drivers, because he's comparing them to himself and he's comparing them to the same car that he was in. So it's only right, it's only fair to kind of put those three people in there. You know, Danny Ricciardo, Webber and Leclerc, they would never pop up to your mind, but when he started to explain them, he really made a good case for them, and it was brilliant and great to hear. One name he did not mention, but we get onto it later. He says Kimi Raikkonen is by far like the biggest natural raw talent he's seen in Formula One. He said he's the kind of driver who his adaptability is what absolutely stood out to him, because of course he was with Kimi in 2018 and 2017. And Kimi was no joke in those years. And of course, Kimi, a Formula One world champion. If you're a world champion, you've got to have some pace about you. But he was mentioning that, you can give this man 10 different cars, and you can give him a car every day, different car every day. And he said that, give him 10 days in that car and he will adapt to it. It will fit like a glove. And he just felt like Kimi is just raw talent. He's natural with the talent. And, that's a massive, big credit to Kimi Raikkonen. So I think overall, he thinks the best driver he's ever driven with or against has definitely been Kimi Raikkonen. And finally, we learned that, he doesn't quite know what he's going to do next, Sebastian Vettel. We don't know where he's going after retirement. We don't know if it's to stay in the sport, the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz, and of course Helmut Marko being nearly 80 years of age, and whether or not Sebastian Vettel might toy with coming back to Red Bull as a sporting director type of thing. And he sort of mentioned that he doesn't know what the future holds. He's not sure if he's going to be back in Formula One or in motorsport. He wants to have like a bit of a self-discovery. He's happy to going into the unknown. He wants to learn more about himself. Is there anything else that I could go out there and achieve, see where life takes him? He's not putting in any promises, he's not putting anything in stone. He's just letting life kind of flow for him, and then he can make that decision there. So it was a brilliant interview nonetheless. Beyond the Grid has always given us some great content, and love hearing from the drivers, learning things about the drivers. And if you like more content like this, do let me know in the comment section below, because then I can do some more reactions of Beyond the Grid. But Sebastian Vettel, happy retirement. I loved and hated him at the same time. He was brilliant at Red Bull, he was brilliant at Toro Rosso, he was unlucky at Ferrari, and in Aston Martin it just wasn't meant to be, because the car isn't quite ready there yet. And Sebastian Vettel's called it time at this moment in time. Who knows, maybe he might come back. I have a feeling he's not all the way finished yet, but he's left every door open. Who knows where he will be next. But happy retirement to Sebastian Vettel. Danke Seb.